Do you want to finish your title? I guess. I don't know.
That is somewhat better. No, maybe not. Gosh dang it. You gotta be kidding me. Why are you doing this to me, technology? Why you do this? It looks like it's actually working now. Why you do this? It's working. Okay. Well, that was fun, wasn't it, folks? Goodness gracious, everybody.
Nothing but a little hiccup.
Yeah, but at least it looks on our end like things are finally working now. I'm going to change the title of this here so that it doesn't just say episode 58.
I'm excited, man. You know, it's our first time talking basketball together.
I'm excited too, and apparently our technology is the only thing that's not excited. It's really frustrating.
Couldn't find my Spurs hat. I must have not.
That's the reason. If you'd have wore your Spurs hat, that would have been.
Didn't like that. I didn't bring
That would have been it. Yeah, didn't like it at all. Streaming does not appreciate you forgetting that.
Just figured, you know, I represent Boston for you, so
I appreciate it. Okay. All right, it's a little laggy, but it's better than it was. Forgive me, folks. You're gonna hear me twice. Okay. I mean, that's a lot better than it was. So
Yeah.
we're gonna roll with it.
We'll monitor it.
Yeah, we're gonna roll with it. We'll figure out. I'm gonna figure out a way to.
Pull up Tyler's phone if something happens.
Yes, please, please do. I love it when people blow up my phone for the rest of the time. It's good. Okay. I just gotta figure out how to get back to that control room. There we are. Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Alright, so it's slowed down quite a bit here. And I think it's because I've got the technology up here. So I think I might call it quits on the technology part and just go with the stream. What do you think?
Whatever you think that's man.
Okay. Yeah, CPU slowed down quite a bit when I did that. Okay. Well, we're going to go with it. We're going to see how this rolls. And then if it doesn't work this time, then I think we're just going to have to record. And then I'll just have to edit and post this tomorrow. That's about the best. That's the only thing that I can do. So, but we'll roll with it.
Yeah,
and either way, we're recording this. So
as long as nothing catches on fire, you know.
I mean, I think some of our hot takes are going to be on fire.
We'll see.
Not at all. But welcome. Sorry for all of that, folks. Hopefully you guys are seeing this okay. Hopefully this is working properly. If it's not, then again, I'm just gonna have to post this tomorrow. But either way, so this is a little bit different than what Dan and I usually do. We usually talk about wrestling. But obviously today we're going to go in a little bit different direction. We're going to kind of give a season retrospective for the NBA season. We're about 15 or 20 games until the end of the season, which is right about that 65-game cutoff for awards.
Yep.
And so I wanted to talk about our NBA award winners for this season, just kind of predict those, talk a little bit about just how the season's gone. answer some questions, some common questions, for what we think might or might not happen in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So we'll just kind of roll with it, see how it goes, and then go from there. So we'll talk about MVP first. Dan, I know you already talked about this tonight. None of you saw it, probably, but
that's
we already.
fine. I don't mind restarting.
We're gonna roll with it again, and see how it goes. So Dan, who is your pick for MVP this year?
Well, I kind of want to look at this as kind of who I feel like deserves to be in that conversation, and I got whittled down to two from there. But I'm going to go on a little rant here with the NBA too. To me, we got like 4 different All-Stars that are pretty deserving of being in the MVP race. To me, it's a center and 3 wings. Now, I know 2 of these guys technically slot in as point guard. Egregious Alexander and Luka Doncic, but they're wings. They're just wings.
Right.
The NBA itself has just transformed over the last 5 years, last 10 years, 15 years, to where we've gone to everybody has the big man, to where then the big man then fewer teams had a big man, then your big man was your power forward, and now pretty much everybody can handle the ball and handle point and stuff like that. So it's like, to me, I almost feel like when we see people that are listed as point guards or shooting guards, it's like, call them the backcourt, call them wings. Because, I mean, that's what, outside of guys like, Steph and Booker, Chris Paul, guys like that, I mean, right. Everybody is basically a wing, and they still handle the point because they grew up either internationally or they grew up, high school running the point no matter, and they just grew it. So they, fill that wing role, but they know how to run the point, Sure. But that said, for the guys I feel like are there in that conversation, is Jokic, is Giannis, Luka, SGA. Those are kind of my 4 guys that I was really looking at. Tatum kind of popped up. We were talking about Celtics and stuff like that a little bit before we started. Tatum kind of popped up in a few categories, but I just feel like these 4 kind of, he's kind of like he's like the best of that next wave, as far as the rest of that race goes. But, Luka's leading the league in scoring, so that's huge for him. The 3 of these 4 guys, they're all scoring at least 30 points a game, so I think that's, when you kind of hit certain thresholds, it's like you're kind of automatically in that consideration. Giannis has always been there. Him and the Bucks have been an interesting team. And it's how much do you weigh? To me, it's like how much do you weigh? Great player in a silo, just taking their stats versus hey, how do they fit in this team, and would this team still be a top 3 seed in the league without this particular player? And I think these guys all kind of fit that bill, so it's kind of just a matter of like, well, which probably makes the most impact. And we have different stats like that. We have our offensive rating. We have VORP, valuable replacement player. We have PER. A lot of different efficiency ratings, offensive ratings, win shares for 48, which I prefer win shares a little bit more. Just because you can, kind of, I feels like it paints a better picture where it's like somebody can have cumulative win share, but it doesn't. Win share 48 I personally like. So all that said, my final 2 guys come down to Jokic and SGA. I think SGA is deservedly up there. He's putting up points. He's contributing across the board in all categories. And the Thunder are a top 3 team in the Western Conference, and I think that might be one of the biggest surprises, if not the biggest surprise in the NBA all season. Mm-hmm. And then Jokic is just there. He does what he does. He could be, if he wins another MVP, I think it's his 3rd in the last 4 years. So, I mean, he obviously has the staying power. He's liked by a lot. He has a really good production ahead of him. And so I had to kind of, I don't know, I went through a lot of this. SGA kind of holds the lead in points per game over SGA does over Jokic, but Jokic kind of blows him out of the water. And when it comes to rebounds, when it comes to assists, And some other categories. Now, to me, I understand rebounds. Jokic's going to have more obviously per game just because considering the positions they play. Assists, I figured assists per game were going to be a little bit different. But it's almost 3 more assists per game that Jokic has over SGA.
Yep.
A little surprising, honestly. So I think it comes down to what you value more. Personally, I value more of people that just bring that all around game to the court. So I'm talking a lot. I feel like I'm talking a lot here.
No.
I'm gonna go with Jokic though. I look at it as while SGA kind of has some efficiency marks that are a little better than him. I honestly feel Jokic is kind of more consistent in more categories where I think that number 2 guy behind Jokic kind of floats between SGA and actually Luka. I think Luka actually, could maybe be a dark horse win it this year for the MVP, but I'm going with Jokic. I'm, giving him his 3rd MVP award in 4 years. I believe I have that number right there. I hope I have that right.
You do.
His 3rd in 4 years, which is kind of weird because I feel like, he's just kind of... He just took over the league overnight, I feel like. But yeah, I love young talent, love to see what they're doing, but I think Jokic is most deserving. If you can, in the true encapsulation to me of MVP, he's doing well in all categories across the board.
Yeah, I feel like no matter what numbers you look into, no matter if you are a counting stats guy, an advanced stats guy, or even just an eye test guy, I feel like Jokic is, he's the best basketball player in the world right now. I don't think that even it's really a debate. I'll tell you, when...
Which is weird to say when LeBron's still playing.
No, it is weird. and it's funny because, 5 years ago, my dad and I had this conversation where he said, when LeBron's getting older, he's 35. He's going to start slowing down. At least that's what we all thought, but he still hasn't. It's insane. Maybe a tad, but not nearly as much as obviously everybody would have figured. But he's starting to get older. Who's going to be the next face of the league? Who's going to take over? Who's going to be the best player in the world? And I had no hesitation. My answer was Giannis at the time. It wasn't. I don't even know if he had won an MVP. I think he won his first MVP in what? Yeah, it might have been one. But that wasn't even. I was like, he's an absolute. They call him the Greek freak for a reason. Like, he's an absolute freak. But Jokic has just come on and kind of, not necessarily out of completely nowhere, but the step that he took from perennial all-star player to the best basketball player in the world, that step seemed fully out of nowhere because it was... hey, and a lot of it's perception. Now that he's won a championship, it's a lot easier to kind of dub him that. But before, I felt like he was really good. He was a big man that could pass, and he was a great rebounder and a pretty good scorer and a good shooter. But the fact that he could run an offense was, just that was insane enough, and I think a lot of it had to do with he didn't have a whole lot of help.
No.
He didn't have a lot of really good teammates. Jamal Murray obviously has come on strong over the last year and a half after his unfortunate slew of injuries that really slowed him down and took away a big chunk of the young part of his career. He was an absolute monster in the bubble, and I felt like we didn't see him for 2.5 years. Because we really didn't. He was injured for most of that. Yep. And then Michael Porter Jr. Was drafted in, I think, 2020. And he was projected to be, a lot of people maybe not remember this, he was projected to be the slam dunk number 1 pick in the draft at one point. It was not even a debate. It was Michael Porter Jr. was going to go number 1 overall. And then he had back surgery as a freshman in high school, or excuse me, a freshman in college. And, once you have back surgery at 18, 19 years old, that's scary for a lot of teams, as it should be. That's not, I'm not saying it, how dare you? No, I get it. Gosh, if you're having back surgery at 18, what are you going to be like when you're 35? You're not going to last very long if your back's already that screwed up that you need surgery, right? And so, a lot of teams kind of said, you're talented, I'm just not sure, but Denver had a top 10 pick. They had the number 10 pick that year, and they had they had Jokic, they had a decent team around him, and they had some cap space. So they said, you know what? We're going to take a flyer on the kid. We don't need him year one. Right. We're going to see how it goes. And then, a couple of savvy trades here and there and a good signing or two, and suddenly you got yourself a championship team. Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., who, again, was supposed to go number 1 overall, and now he's on your team because you took that chance, and it ended up working out. I mean, he's not who everybody thought he would be. Right. He's a little inefficient, but he's still a good player.
He's good for the role he needs to be for Denver, yeah.
And I'll tell you what, at the time, everybody sat there and was like, why is Denver the one that traded for Aaron Gordon? Out of all the teams, Denver? That doesn't make much sense. Brilliant, looking back in hindsight, right? Everybody who said that is looks silly now, including myself. So they really did a great job putting that whole team together. And all this to say, I have SGA as my MVP.
Okay.
I just completely swerved everybody right there. Jokic is the best basketball player in the world. That's right, and then just punch you right in the stomach and just go right through the heart. For me, Nikola Jokic again, best basketball player in the world. But he's not my MVP because I think what Shea has done this year for the team that he is on, I think is absolutely incredible. I think that, yes, you can look at Jokic is the best player on the best team in the West. And so that is going to give you a huge leg up to the MVP. Unless your name is Jason Tatum, in which apparently that no longer matters. I have a lot of things to say about Jason Tatum's MVP candidacy. I am not picking Jason Tatum to be my MVP. I do not think he has had the best year to win MVP. I'm telling you that right now. I'll just sidebar here about it real quick. It bothers me so much when I hear people say, oh, Jason Tatum can't win an MVP until he wins a championship. Because nobody's going to take him seriously until he wins a championship.
Correlate.
First of all, it's a regular season award, so it shouldn't matter. Right. Second of all, who was last year's MVP? Joel Embiid. How many championships has he won? Mm-hmm. None. No. Who was the MVP before that? Nikola Jokic. Oh, Tyler, he's won a championship. Yeah, he also won an MVP 2 years before he won a championship.
Yep.
Back. So there's your two. There's your two. Yeah, 2 MVPs. So that's 3 MVP trophies in a row that were given out to people who had not won a championship by the time they won the trophy.
Yep.
Who was the one before that? Giannis.
Probably obviously Giannis.
Did he win?
Don't quiz me on the spot here.
Yeah. Obviously, the last time he won MVP, he had already won a championship. But how many championships did he win when he won his first MVP? None. No. Who was the MVP before that?
I told you, don't quiz me like this.
James Harden. How many championships has he won? 0. Who was the MVP before that? Russell Westbrook. How many championships has he won? 0. It makes.
Can I give a sign to 0?
It makes. Yeah, right. Just over and over again. It's correct again. It's like but it just does not make a lick of sense to me.
Right.
How you can have. And by the way,
and it shouldn't. Championship shouldn't. And like you said, I'm wholeheartedly agree. Championship doesn't correlate. It's 2 different things. Championship is a team thing. MVP's personal thing, and as much as postseason bias can sometimes affect that, by the time the voting has happened, it is 100% a regular season award. And honestly, shouldn't always go to the best person on the best team.
No, it shouldn't. And I'm not saying that he deserves to win an MVP this season. I have already said that 3 times now, but just in case people are like, hey, Jason Tatum, bye, that. No, he does not deserve it this year, nor did he deserve it last year. But the reason he deserves it is because he has not had the best season out of everybody in the NBA. That's why he doesn't deserve it. It's not because he hasn't won a championship or because he needs to play better in the playoffs. Well, guess what? So does Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid plays absolutely terrible compared to his regular season stats in the playoffs. Now, granted, a lot of that's due to injury. But Jason Tatum played the entire finals with a broken elbow, something like that. He played a couple of bad games last year in the playoffs as well, but he also dropped 51 in a Game 7. And I also seen him drop 46 in a Game 6 with the season on the line. And people don't remember this because we ended up losing 4-1 in the series, but when we lost Jaylen Brown and we went up against the 3-headed monster Brooklyn Nets with James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant at the time.
Yeah.
Jason Tatum dropped like 55 points in Game 3, and that was the only game that we won because there was nobody else on that team that could do anything at the time because everybody was injured.
Right.
So, like, he's had huge games in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Right? But either way, this isn't a Jason Tatum mark thing. It's not going to be. But the point is that anybody who says Jason Tatum needs to play better in the playoffs before you could start voting for him for MVP, just shut up. Like, it's just such a stupid argument. It makes no sense. And by the way, he's just turned 26 like 3 weeks ago. I'm going to name you 4 players. Right? I'm going to name you 4 all-time greats. Giannis, LeBron James, Nikola Jokic, and James Harden. None of those men had a championship before 26. Some of those men do not have championships now in James Harden. Right. You want to know who else did not have a championship by the time they were 26 years old? Michael Jeffrey Jordan. Relax, folks. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to MVP. Shea's my MVP. What he's done on that team has been just incredible. 30-plus points a night. The efficiency's through the roof. His true and effective shooting numbers are insane. And I'll tell you what, a thing that I really look for with MVP candidates specifically is how you perform in close games and how you perform in crunch time. Now, obviously, there have been some moments where not only him, but the entire Thunder team have struggled in big-time games against big-time teams. Because they are young, they are inexperienced, and it's fine. And you can say a lot of the team's success has to do with a guy who it's going to be tough to not pick for most improved in Jalen Williams for the Thunder, because I think the guy went from averaging 6 points a night to now averaging 20 in a season. I mean, overnight, he's a completely different player. It's unbelievable. And then he might have been more than 6, but it might as well be. It's just a huge leap. So, you could say that he's had a lot to do with his success, and the fact that Chet's now playing when he wasn't last year. There's a lot of reasons why the Thunder are better, but one of the main reasons is because Shea is an alpha dog, and he is one of the biggest alphas in the NBA.
Yep.
When the Celtics had to play the Thunder in Oklahoma City, I was dreading watching that because I knew that it was going to be a very, very tough game, and teams like the Thunder, Celtics struggle against because they just move all the time, and then we tend to struggle against teams like that, the Warriors, the Heat, teams that just off-ball move everywhere. And, that didn't matter how much they moved because we have, I think, the best defensive backcourt maybe ever on paper in Derek White and Drew Holiday, and SGA just went, I'm just faster than both of you, and he literally ran by them all game.
Yeah.
And Drew Holiday and Derek White are like, I don't really know what to do. I can stop literally anyone else, and I cannot stop this guy. I mean, he was just unbeatable, unguardable. And again, one of the things I look for is playing against big-time teams in big-time games. He dropped 35-some points that day. I have seen him take over fourth quarters in close games where, he's just hitting step-back jump shots with hands in his face over and over and over and over again. I think, against the Heat the other night? I think he went 5 for 5.
Yeah,
5 straight,
like that.
5 straight possessions in the fourth quarter, and all of them were tough mid-range jump shots on the road with a hand in his face. And it's just like, dude, you can't, there's some things you just can't guard. Now, again, that's not to say that Jokic doesn't have that ability. He certainly does. I don't think I've seen him miss a game-winning or game-tying shot or a big shot, it feels like, in the last 2 years. Even just silly ones like, against the Celtics the other day. He had a shot to end the first quarter, and there was 2 dudes in his face. He just kind of chucked it like that, and, it was just a mid-range, and he banked it in. It was perfect. You just knew it was going in. He has that too, but for me, Jokic has had his flowers. He doesn't need another MVP this year, just like he didn't need it last year. I was very happy to see Joel Embiid win it. I definitely thought he deserved it. And I think that SGA deserves it this year. I think that, especially if the Thunder end up winning the West, which is a possibility, I think that Shea 100% deserves it because I don't know, based on the landscape of the NBA, when he's going to get another chance to win one. Right. And I think everybody kind of has their time. Yeah, and has their moment to, not everybody, obviously, but a lot of these top players are going to have
generational talent.
Yeah, there might be a year where Jason Tatum has his time, where I'm sitting up here going, I mean, I understand I'm biased, but I think this year might be his year. That year hasn't happened yet, but it might. Right. Might be next year. Who knows, right? Who knows? And Luka might be Luka next year.
And I mean, you could almost consider Luka this year, I think, too.
You certainly could. But for me, I think that I am also putting team success as a marker, and that marker really hurts Luka because his team's just not performing as well as other teams.
There is something to be said about, not you don't want to always take the best player on the best team, but at the same time, if a team is the best team because of pretty much one player, which I think kind of Jokic and SGA kind of both fit that mold for their teams, and it was honestly very hard for me to pick between the two because it's like I feel like you're looking at similar profile. Or there can be the guys that you're going to rely on at the end of the game. There can be guys that they can change the game in a heartbeat. I don't. SJ is a great player to pick. I think. You can't go wrong with either. I think the consensus is probably going with Jokic, which kind of makes me kind of hope you're right that SJ gets it.
Fair enough.
But I think you're looking at two players at the cream of the crop of this season this year.
I agree. Okay, SGA, Nikola Jokic, offensive player of the year.
Offensive player of the year.
Or defensive player. I don't know why I said offensive player of the year. Sorry. That's fine. There is no offensive player of the year. That's football. Defensive player of the year.
I don't know. Again, you don't have good defensive stats. You could say one guy's the best blocker, one guy gets most steals, one guy gets XYZ, one guy is the best defensive led share. Which can kind of favor guys that are doing well defensively with good teams. Go Bears on Minnesota right now. The consensus odds makers, from what I've read, seem to make it sound like it's Gobert versus Wemby. I honestly think you could throw Jokic in that. I think in a sense AD has Anthony Davis
Jokic for defensive player of the year.
He's in the top 15 of a lot of categories of both steals, blocks, defensive rebounds. He's top 10 in two of those and top 15 across all three of those. So big counting stats ones. I think again it's there. I think Giannis is kind of in the same category.
Sure.
Of hitting a lot of those marks. I had some stuff pulled up here if I can just pull up really quickly. And again, I was looking at this a lot to where I'm just like, okay, depending on your weight stuff, defensive rating, again, it's hard. Since the consensus kind of seems to be down to Gobert and Wemby, that's kind of where I'm leaning. I think you can throw a bunch of other people in there. I think guards have won this a few times in the last few years. Derek White's actually a name that's popped up in some stuff.
As it should be.
I love seeing him on the Spurs. I was very disappointed when the Spurs traded him away because I was like, he could have been a foundation for you guys. But I know that helped, kind of more the future at the time. And but Derek White and Wemby, come on. That would have been fun in San Antonio. I think going as a silo, defensive player of the year, looking at their body of work, I'd lean towards Wemby. I do kind of claim the Spurs as my team, so maybe I'm being a little bit of a homer there, but Wemby is changing the game in a lot of different ways. I'm pretty sure he leads the league in blocks. He does. He grabs a bunch of defensive rebounds.
Let me make sure he still does. I have it pulled up here. He does.
He does. There's some other stats that came across that were like advanced stats, if that makes sense. There were kind of goes couple favor Wemby, couple favor Gobert. But when you look at your peripheral stats, blocks, Wembanyama has about a 1.5 block lead per game on him. He has about twice as many steals per game. Gobert gets a few more defensive rebounds, but not much more. You start to try to find deflections and other stats. Wemby kind of leans Gobert there. There's some other stuff that NBA.com actually has some good articles that I found that do it. But I think Gobert, I think, is doing well defensively because of Minnesota, but I think this award kind of for me looks at, again, if you're looking at the person as a whole, just as the person, the fact that Wemby is being such a force defensively and offensively too, but defensively on such a bad team, I think almost kind of helps him. It's like he's still out there, he's still blocking shots every game, he's still doing everything and playing with heart. I think that's great thing about Popovich in his corner there. So I mean, I have to go Wemby here. I think you could go so many different ways. Again, I mentioned Derek White. I mentioned Giannis. I think SGA has some. I think there's enough. Depending on again what stat or stats you want to pull from, I think you can make an argument for a lot of different people. But I think just looking at, when I think defensive player of the year, defensive players, I want a guy that can just protect the paint for me. Just alter possession so quickly under the basket, and Wemby just hits a lot of those marks for me.
Fair enough, man. That's a great argument for Wemby. And it's so funny because here I was sitting and I had unique thoughts all to myself, and I don't at all because I also had Victor Wembanyama winning Defensive Player of the Year, and I thought Dan was going to go with the conventional answer, like, I think it's going to be Rudy Gobert. It's going to be like, because, hey, defensive win shares, he leads the league. Like, that's a great stat. Like, that's good. Yeah. Rudy Gobert right there. 4.9 defensive win shares. That leads the league right there.
Right.
That's your decoy. And, defensive box plus minus, Nikola Jokic leads in that category. So he's clearly the best defensive player in the world. This big old silly whale man.
Right. But I think because of what you just listed, because of all these different, what makes Derek White a better defensive player over Wembanyama or vice versa? Well, White's a guard. He's going to probably pick up more steals. He's not going to get as many blocks. Whereas vice versa for Wemby, so it's like, unless you have a guy that's kind of stuffing each category, which no one really truly is. Gobert kind of does, but again, it's like so many people leads and are ranked so differently in so many categories, and defensive stats are just hard to track. NBA is so very offensive minded, has been that way the last 10, increasingly the last 10 years, to where it's, it's almost, you have to rely on that eye test more. And I don't always get to watch a lot of games, so that's why I kind of go to the stats. So that's where I'm like very conflicted in this. But yeah, it's interesting that we do agree on that, because I figured you'd have something completely different.
Yep. No, I want not want necessarily, but my prediction is first ever Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year combo in NBA history. Victor Wembanyama and I think he's going to win both.
Yeah.
I think at the beginning of the year, my pick for Rookie of the Year would have been Chet. Even with Wemby, I just figured that he'd be a little bit overhyped. And he has not been. I mean, he's been phenomenal, and Chet's been great. I think I always thought that Chet should have been the number one pick in the draft over Paolo Banchero, although he's had a great year too this year. So I think both of them obviously could have been number one, and it worked out either way. But regardless, I think it's going to be Wemby wins Defensive Player of the Year, and I also think he's going to win Rookie of the Year as well. So with that transition.
Yeah, I guess we're gonna both be, we're gonna agree a lot in these two categories. I agree. I was looking at basically Wemby and Chet. I don't really think there's anybody.
There's nobody else.
No. I some stuff about Holmgren that I found interesting. Wemby turns the ball over a lot.
He does.
I think it's at least twice as many turnovers per game, almost maybe 3 times as Holmgren. But to me, part of that is like, well, I mean, who's on the Spurs outside of Wemby?
Yeah, I mean,
I think that might be a factor into that.
Yeah, the guy who I thought was going to be their second best player in Keldon Johnson, he's not even starting anymore. He's like coming off the bench. So I mean, or at least he was. I don't know. Maybe last game.
The Spurs are like the bottom 5 team. I mean, they could end up with a number doubtful, but they could end up with the number 1 pick 2 years ago.
If they got Cooper Flag, then Wemby, I'm gonna lose my mind. But. Anywho's, so that's good. Obviously we have agreements there. Now, this is where we may begin to differ here. Am I
I
where
don't have too many more other awards outside for player awards.
Okay, I was thinking Coach of the Year is
Yeah.
the next thing. Am I
Yeah.
off? Okay,
No,
perfect.
no,
No, I had it
no.
right. Okay, great. So then, Coach of the Year. I'm going to take this one first, just because I
Sure.
think you already know what my answer is going to be. This
Probably.
is where my Celtics bias is going to come out, but I think the clear, obvious choice is Joe Mazzulla. He is coaching the best basketball team in the league right now. By far the best record. It is his second year. And I don't even know if I would... obviously it is his second full year, but last year he didn't get a training camp. Last year he didn't get preseason. He got nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so he basically had to take over a team that did not respect him, and with the coaching staff that did not want to listen to him. And so this is the first year that his vision is actually being showcased and shown through with his coaching staff and his direction. And yes, I understand how much talent the Celtics have. Yes, I understand that they still do blow leads to Dean Wade by himself. I will never get over that. In my life. We were up by 22 points, and Dean Wade, by himself, scored 21 points in the fourth quarter against the Celtics. By the way, while I was doing research for this podcast, would you like to know, if the NBA season ended today, who would have, if minutes were not a thing, there was not a minutes restriction, who would have the best defensive rating in the NBA? Dean Wade has the best defensive rating in the NBA right now. Because he plays like 11 seconds a game. And it bothers me so much that is the thing. But anyway.
That's why you have to take minutes into consideration.
Right, obviously. But no, anyway. The point is that either way, again, you can definitely argue Mark Deschanel for the Thunder and the great, fantastic job that he has done out there in Oklahoma City. He's done really, really well, taking a very, very young team, and in a lot of people's minds, overperformed. Not in my mind, overperformed, because anybody who watched this podcast knows that I've been screaming from the mountaintops that the Thunder are going to be a top 4 team in the West this year, and nobody believed me. And then look where they're at. They're a top 4 team in the West. And I'm pretty sure that still everybody's like, but I don't understand.
Honestly, top 3, I think that's the top 3 and everybody else right now.
Yeah, exactly. And so, well, no, I'd say top 4. Minnesota, Clippers, Thunder, and Nuggets. I'd still keep the Timberwolves in there. Their defense is good enough.
Oh, no, I'd drop out the Clippers, but we can get that one.
Okay, fair enough. But, the point is that you could definitely make that argument for Mark Deschanel. I think that, Eric Spoelstra's always in that conversation just because he's the best coach in the NBA. Yeah. No offense to Greg Popovich, but sorry, Pop, your title's been taken at this point. He's got no talent over there. It's not really his fault, but, he's the greatest coach of all time.
Thanks, Cly.
I don't know what to tell you, but,
Thanks, Cly. I appreciate that. Did such a solid there.
Sorry. But, Spoelstra's, I think Spoelstra's always in the conversation. I think that you can definitely give, oh my goodness. Why am I blanking on his name? JB Bickerstaff? Is that who's in Cleveland right now?
Sure.
I think so. I think it's JB Bickerstaff, unless I'm out of my mind. I don't know why I'm second-guessing myself, but I'm pretty sure it's JB Bickerstaff. As of the last time I looked, they were second in the East. I think that they have overperformed a little bit this year. Mm-hmm. And I know we're going to talk about teams that have overperformed. Perfect. Okay, I was making sure that I wasn't crazy. I was pretty sure.
Good old fact checking here.
but either way, Bickerstaff is a stretch. Spoelstra's a stretch. I can certainly see Deschanel winning it. But I'll tell you what, man. The last time I was 100% positive the Boston Celtics coach should have won Defensive Player of the Year. Or Defensive Player. Yes, the coach should have won Defensive Player of the Year. I'm tired. Coach of the Year. He did not win it at all. And let me tell you, when your second best player in Gordon Hayward goes down 5 minutes into his first game and breaks his leg, and then Kyrie Irving only plays 32 games and tears his meniscus or whatever in his knee, and he's out for the rest of the year. and you fight your way to the number 1 seed in the East with that team, and you don't win Coach of the Year, then that's a crime. And guess what? You want to know how much that award was meaningless that year? Who won that award? Do you remember?
No.
The answer was Dwayne Casey, the head coach of the Toronto Raptors, who fired him 1 month after he won Coach of the Year.
Right. The only coach of the year to be fired after he won it.
Yeah. And it was one of those things where you just sit there and go, why did you give it to him then if he was that bad? Like, it just, now obviously the organization didn't give it to him. But point is, Joe Mazzulla should win Coach of the Year. I understand you could call it Celtics bias, but please name me a better coaching job in the NBA right now, definitively, than what Joe Mazzulla is doing out there in Boston. He is leading, by far, the best team in the league record-wise. You could argue, obviously talent-wise with the Nuggets or whoever.
Right.
But their record is better than everyone else. They are number 1 in offensive efficiency, number 2 in defensive efficiency, number 1 in net rating, best record, longest win streak, best record at home. You can go on and on and on and on with the stats that the Celtics lead in, and a lot of that is steered by Joe Mazzulla.
Yep. I had 4 different candidates here.
Who am I forgetting?
Well, I don't know if you're necessarily forgetting anybody. I just kind of look at different guys for kind of where the team was last year, considering to where they are now. Kind of what they did with 1 year. I didn't consider Joe Mazzulla, so that's I should have thrown.
You didn't? Oh God!
No, that's fine. So I'm gonna give you my 4 right now.
I guess that's what I deserve.
So Mosley over in Orlando. I figure Orlando. I feel like.
Oh yeah, Jamal Mosley.
They get rid of their star.
They
get rid of their star player every other year. It feels like. They weren't projected to do well. They're top. Well, what are they in the East right now? 4, I think. They were near the top of the East. They're 5 right now in the East. So I mean, there's some stuff that kind of go against him this year, but that team has steadily increased their win total over the last 3 years. He's literally definition of a career assistant before getting the job in Orlando.
Yeah, he's certainly he's done a great job. I should have mentioned how good of a job he's done.
One guy, and I would say this might be a guy that's been around for a long time, Tom Thibodeau with the Knicks.
Tommy T. Oh my.
Knicks are on track for their 3rd season in the past 4 years with more than 40 wins, and they're on track for their 3rd playoff appearance in the last 4 years. Which New York Knicks and wins and playoffs were synonymous for a long time. Thibodeau's going to run out of steam because I feel like he never really stays in one place for a long time. But he's on the list for consideration. Chris Finch with the Timberwolves. I don't think the Wolves were expected to be a top 3, top 4 team in the West this year. This is Finch's 4th year as coach. They're on track for the best record in 7 seasons. 3rd straight 40+ win season. But my guy, Mark, pronounce his last name for me. Deschanel. Thank you. Mark Deschanel for the Thunder. Really, I don't know. Just like his name just really popped out from a lot of things.
Sure.
Again, just looking at criteria of the team was bad last year. What a turnaround they've done this year. Thunder, they were kind of a trendier pick to maybe be a playoff team. Probably the play-in. They're a top 4 team. I think that helps him. This is Mark's 4th season. It'd be his first 50-win season as a coach. It'd be the Thunder's first 50-win season in 9 years. And here's what I found some interesting stuff too. Like he was actually the G League's head coach for 4 or 5 years for the Thunder, and he actually was an assistant. He would kind of help us as an assistant with OKC before he took the head coaching job. He helped with Billy Donovan, who he also was an assistant for when Billy and him were in Florida.
Yep.
So I think some, to me when you kind of create that story around it too, it's like how he's kind of risen through different things. The Thunder's G League team when he was coaching them, they made the G League playoffs for what that's worth. 4 to 5 years was he as head coach. In a way, I feel like Mark's kind of like kind of that slow burn as a coach. Again, I think they weren't. Not many people, not many voices were saying, "Hey, this is gonna be a top team next year."
Yeah.
You look at how they've really turned over their roster and all the picks that they've gathered. I mean, they have 2 firsts in every draft through 2029 or something like that.
Oh, it's more than 2. I think I heard 36 draft picks in the next 8 seasons.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's something like that.
I would say at least a third of those are first rounders.
Oh, probably about more than half. I'd say.
It's a team that again wasn't exactly thought of at the top of the West when you got so many good teams in the West, or on paper at least. Which we'll talk about in a little bit too. But yeah, Mark Daigneault he's my pick. I think Celtics coach is, another great consideration. Again, best record definitely helps that conversation. You can't argue with that. It's, hey, I have these, I still took this talent and put him to the best record. It's not like, he's done that. And again, second season in doing that is also impressive with, especially when he's kind of handed the reins without any, foresight or preparation, really. Yeah. So, it's probably down to those 2 guys. So we'll be very interested in who wins that.
Yeah, no, and it's okay. I understand that the overlooking there. It happens literally every season. Again, Brad Stevens took a team that, yes, had a lot of high expectations, but lost their second best player to a broken leg 5 minutes into the year, and then lost its best player at the time for the remainder of the season, about halfway through. Yep. And he still took that team to the number 1 or number 2 seed in the East, whatever it was. Took it to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals with a roster that should not have gone that far.
Right.
And yet, not only did he not win Coach of the Year, he was not a finalist for Coach of the Year that year. He did not get a single vote. And it's one of those things where you just sit there and you just know that if you're the Celtics coach, you'll never get considered for Coach of the Year. So I honestly would not be surprised if the top 3 Coach of the Year, people were, Tom Thibodeau, Chris Finch, and Mark Daigneault. And they're just like, yep. No, Joe, the guy that won 60, I took a team that won 65 games this year? Nah, he's not. He's not Coach of the Year. That makes no sense.
Well, I think it is a lot about perception and expectation and stuff. It's almost like since the Celtics have had Tatum and Brown for so long, so I'm like, they're almost expected to always have a good record. So it's like, I feel like a lot more voices in the last couple of seasons like, well, a coach doesn't really matter in the NBA, and it does. I'm not saying that it doesn't. I wholeheartedly agree. A coach has still set the tone, still got to set the discipline, you got to set the plays. You can't just go out there and play street ball, especially against a team like the Thunder. That can, they might kind of play street ball in a way, but they're so fast. It's like you got to work on ways to stop a team like that. Yeah. And that team is constructed to slow down teams, and again, like you said, second, best defensive rating, so that obviously means something, so I mean, it's, again, expectations, perception, I think probably will, unfortunately, hurt Boston, and I think it hurts top teams like that, just because it's like, if a guy comes in that's taken over a team that's been good for a long time, or has always had Kevin Durant, or have LeBron James, or Michael Jordan. It's like, well, of course that team and coach are going to be good because they have X player, but it's like they still have to they're still a factor, or that coach matters.
Yeah. No, and I think another coach that I could see being in the running at the end of the year, especially if they end up, doing a little bit better down the stretch, end up being a top 4 seed in the East, which I think is highly possible considering how close it is Rick Carlisle out in Indiana. I think that they have. I think the fact that he's been able to adapt to his roster. I mean, he was fired in Dallas because it seemed like Luka and him just were not getting along, and so obviously he's out. And then he ends up going to Indiana, who really was in a complete rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have a Luka.
No, but they got somebody who's pretty damn close, and Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah, Halliburton's pretty close.
He's pretty freaking good, that kid. Mm-hmm. But they traded Sabonis, who was their best player, and they basically were, a team that was quote unquote stuck in limbo for a while, where it's like, okay, yeah, you're rebuilding, but you refused to trade Miles Turner, and then you traded for Buddy Hield, and well, I guess you technically got him in the Sabonis trade, but you didn't want to trade Buddy Hield for a couple of years. They finally just traded him this year, but yet you're still in the playoff hunt. But now you're trading that. It's kind of odd. But
it's the East too. But at the same time, it's that. Oh, but it's just the Eastern Conference. Kind of that argument works both ways.
Yeah, and but he took that roster, which was a completely different roster, and he completely changed up his coaching style. He said, okay, if I tried to coach this team like I tried to coach all the other teams I'd coached for, then we are going to win 13 games because we do not have the personnel to, sit and play hardcore defense and then slow the pace down and be patient and get your shot, with 4 seconds left in the shot clock. No, my team is fast. We have a lot of shooting, don't have a whole lot of defense, and I've got a guy that can run the point that can get anybody open at any time and has incredible ball vision. Yeah. And so we need to space the floor. We need to run in transition. And that's just it. So they play 1,000 miles an hour every night because that's their personnel. And instead of him saying, "Oh well, I'm just we're gonna whip these young whippersnappers into shape and make sure that they play the right brand of it," no, he let them play their brand of basketball. Mm-hmm. And you got a team full of guys over there that he's getting the very best out of.
Yeah.
And so I think he's done a great job out there.
And Carlisle's a guy who's been around the league for a long time, like Thibodeau. It's like. The fact that those guys can keep getting jobs and keep adapting certain rosters, that's what it takes, and that's what it's kudos to those guys because the NBA is always changing. Oh, yeah. It's getting faster. It's getting more. It's getting to where nobody wants to shoot within 5 feet of the basket anymore.
Sure. No,
it's like if I can't shoot threes 50% of the time, I don't want to shoot the ball.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Which is weird because that's not the NBA we grew up with.
Oh yeah. For sure.
So I have, if you don't mind, I just have some questions for you.
Fire away, man.
I might throw some opinion here, but I'm curious your take. You've obviously I think watched the product a lot more than I have this year.
I don't know about a lot more than you, but I have watched a lot.
So you watched a lot more, so I'm kind of considering. So first one's for you. Which team in the NBA right now is doing better than you expected them to do?
Better than I expected them to do? Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Minnesota is a team that I really wrote off for good reason. I think most people did, which is another reason why when you said Chris Finch, I almost wanted to smack myself in the forehead because he's done a great job turning that team around. And I know you mentioned earlier, like coaching only means so much, right? Like for instance, I think Will Hardy is one of the best coaches in the NBA. He's the coach of the Utah Jazz, but the Utah Jazz have no talent. Like they've got Lauri Markkanen, a kind of washed up John Collins, and then just a bunch of young, crazy dudes, and then an older Jordan Clarkson.
Two things there too before you go further. Sorry. One, the fact that we're talking about John Collins already washed up is a little disappointing.
Oh, it is 100% disappointing.
I mean, he was supposed to be like that one of the centerpieces for Atlanta because they drafted him one year and they drafted Trae Young the next year. Should have taken Luka.
They did take Luka. Well, they just then traded him away.
They shouldn't have traded away Luka and traded for him. That's another discussion for another time because we've kind of discussed that before a little bit. But so that's one of my first thought when you were saying that. The second thought is like the Jazz would probably be the worst team in the league if it wasn't for the Pistons and Wizards.
Yeah, fair enough.
And they were a playoff team 2 years ago?
The Jazz?
Yeah.
I mean, they're a fringe playoff team this year. They're right outside the play-in tournament right now. But I mean, they just. I think Will Hardy has done a great job, and he's a really good coach. He was a guy in the Celtics learning tree. Mm-hmm. But there's only so much that you can do as a coach when you don't have a whole lot of talent to back it all up. So
I guess they have the Grizzlies and Trailblazers to thank. Worse than them too.
So the Timberwolves is really the main team that sticks out to me that I think is doing better than what I expected. I think seeding wise, the Magic are doing about where I thought, but record wise, I think that they are doing a little bit better. Mm-hmm. They really.
That's kind of why I threw their coach's name in that pool too, because it's like they've steadily kind of increased their wins year over year last few years. I think they're on pace for at least 40 right now.
Yeah.
And I think they only had 36 or 37 last year. So
and so those are really the two teams that I kind of look at and think, those two franchises are doing better this year than I thought. Everywhere else kind of makes sense. I'm just trying to think of if there's any other ones that I forgot. I mean, obviously Cleveland. I think Cleveland's the opposite of what I just said, which is record-wise, I think that they're about where I thought that they would be, but obviously the East is a little bit worse than what I anticipated this year. 42 wins. They're on pace for about 50 wins this year. Maybe 51 or 52. Like, that's about where I figured they'd be.
Right.
But I figured that'd be good enough for 5 seed in the East, which is where I thought that they'd be. But now they're number 2 as of again. I mean, I think you got to put. They're tied for
going into Thursday night's games. Cleveland and Milwaukee are tied.
Exactly. So they're second in the East. I would not have predicted that. I figured that would have been Milwaukee, although Milwaukee's tied, so it doesn't really matter. Right. So that's another one that I guess maybe a little bit, but everybody else, I think is realistically where I thought that they would be. I think the only thing that I really would have swapped in the Eastern Conference was I thought the Hawks would have been a little bit better than they are, and then the Magic would have been a little bit maybe worse than they are, but that's really it.
Yeah. I think Trey missed a little bit, or he's missing or he just got back from missing a few weeks ago.
Yeah, he had surgery on on his hand or on his thumb or on something. I don't know how long he's going to be out, but I did see the ridiculous tweet where he had his entire arm wrapped up and he was like, "Prayers up for me," and he's like, "Brother, you had surgery on your finger. You didn't break your whole everything. I mean, relax. It's gonna be fine." But anyway, what other questions you got?
Which team is worse than what you expected
this year? Phoenix. I think everybody and their mother thought that Phoenix was going to be a top 3 seed, if not win the whole West.
Yeah, I mean, and they're currently in the play-in right
They
now.
are barely in the play-in too. I mean, they lose 2 or 3 more games, they might be the 9 or 10 seed. It's rough and it's crazy because obviously in the middle of last year you traded for Kevin Durant. You thought that might have been enough, and then it wasn't enough. You traded away DeAndre Ayton. You got Nurkic and a couple of other pieces back and some draft capital, which you needed after trading for. For KD, and then you traded for Bradley Beal. And it's one of those things where you sit there and you're like, okay, now you got no more excuses left. You've got, you traded away Chris Paul. You've turned basically the point guard, duties over to Devin Booker. He's basically your full-time point guard. Mm-hmm. You got Bradley Beal at your 2. I forget who's their starting 3 right now. I know Royce O'Neal's out there. I don't know if he's starting for them, because they traded for him about a month ago. So I don't know if he's starting. And then obviously KD at your 4 and Nurkic at your 5. Like, that's a great starting 5. Right. Especially with Nurkic this year. I think he's averaging 13 rebounds a night. Like, he's a great defensive player in and of himself. He's really grown in Phoenix. But, it's wild to think that a team that has Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal, 3 of the best isolation scorers, and realistically 3 pretty unselfish players. It's not like these are, horrendous ball hogs that are known for, never sharing the ball and not having any assists, and not none of those players have ever really felt that way. Beal more than the other 2, I guess. But
because Beal was like the only guy.
Yeah, he was really the only.
Everybody thought it'd be different with Beal going to Phoenix. It's like he doesn't have to be the guy every night now. But I mean, I know they had some injuries. I don't think they all 3 played a game together until
they haven't played together more than 7 or 8 games this year.
Yeah.
But the thing is you think about a team that has those 3 players on it, they by far have the worst point differential in the fourth quarter in the NBA. Like, I'm talking the Miami Heat, which is hilarious to think about that they were in the finals last year, and this is a stat. They have the second worst point differential. I think it's like minus 135. And Phoenix is like the worst, and they're like minus 220. Like, it's a chasm between second to last and last. The Phoenix Suns are by far the worst team in the NBA in the fourth quarter. And it's crazy to think about a team that has those 3 superstars on it can be that bad late in games. But it has been the case for this year, for whatever the reason is. So they are the easy number one team that I thought would be better than they are. And it just has not worked out. I mentioned Atlanta. I really thought that Atlanta would be a touch better than they are. I thought that with, especially if you'd have told me how much better Jalen Johnson would have gotten in the offseason, I would have figured that they'd have taken a step forward. But they have not. They have basically either stayed the same or maybe even taken a step back. I know injuries plays a part in all of this.
Right.
But they're a team that definitely has been a little bit worse than what I thought. Detroit too. I mean, I didn't expect them to be good. I'm not saying I didn't think they were going to be the 5 seed in the East. Like, just relax. But I definitely did not expect them to break the record for most consecutive losses in NBA history. That's tough to watch. That team was way better than that. I mean, Jalen Smith. That's their center, right? Am I in my mind? No. Jalen Duren. Sorry, not Jalen Smith. I knew I had that wrong. I was like, something's not right here. Jalen Duren. Fantastic young center. Obviously, Cade Cunningham coming back and being their alpha. You had Bogdanovich. You had Alec Burks. You had talent on this team. And then obviously Acer Thompson coming off your bench, your high draft pick this year, which again, Pistons got NBA 2K screwed this year where, I don't know if you play a lot of 2K, but if you are projected to have the number 1 pick in the draft, you will get that approximately 0 times and you will get the 5th pick every single time. Like, it is literally a 100%
NBA draft
guarantee that you will get the 5th pick if you have the best odds. Like, I think I can count on one hand the amount of rebuilds that I've done on 2K in any year where, I traded for the 2025 Clippers pick or something, and they ended up getting rid of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, so they had the worst record in the league, and that pick ended up actually staying at number 1. Like, one hand. Like, it never happens. And that's exactly what happened to the Pistons. They had the worst record in basketball last year, and they got the 5th pick for their troubles. They didn't even get number 2 or 3 or 4. Nope. They get the 5th pick. But anyway, I thought they'd be better than 10 wins or 11 wins or whatever the heck they're at this year.
Up to 12 now.
Oh, up to 12. Oh, good. That's great. I thought they'd be a lot better than 12.
Still the second worst league in the record, or second worst record in the league.
Yeah, and then the last one, I think this is, and you talk about injuries, man. Memphis, oh boy, I mean, they have just been
Ja right out of the gate.
Oh, Ja suspended, and then immediately 3 games into him coming back, he blows out his shoulder or whatever it was. He's out for the year. Yeah. I think at one point they were down 13 players. Like, it just is. It's one of those things.
The fact that they have 23 wins on top of all that.
Yeah, I mean, they when some of their guys actually play, they have a lot of talent. I mean, they still. I mean, obviously they traded away Steven Adams at this point now, but at the beginning of the year, their starting lineup was Steven Adams, Triple J, Desmond Bane. I don't know if Marcus Smart was going to start for them. Ja Morant, and then you can even you could put whoever you feel like you need to replace Dylan Brooks in the starting lineup. I would have probably said Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, and then Ja Morant would have been your starters. And off the bench you would have had Sandy Aldama, and there's a good amount of talent out there in Memphis when their whole team is healthy. And it just was not. I mean, it was not their year. They just were completely destroyed by injuries. All season, they basically have been playing with a G League team for the entire year. And so it's not necessarily their fault that they're this bad, just because injuries have absolutely destroyed their entire roster. Brandon Clark's another guy that would have come off the bench, been a backup big for them that I really, really like. He was a high draft pick, I think at number 7 a few years ago. But he was out for the year before the year even started. So and the list goes on and on and on and on of all these guys that just kept getting hurt, and so that's another one.
So let's focus on the top of the West right now.
Top of the West. Okay.
I kind of go back and forth on the Clippers.
Before you continue, I do want to say I apologize that you guys hear me cough. I haven't done the podcast in a couple of weeks. I had acute bronchitis, and I'm antibiotics and all that stuff, but the cough is still there. So I do apologize for continuing to hear that. I'm sure it's annoyed everybody, but I can't help it.
Hey, I'm just glad you're feeling better.
Thanks, man. I'm alive. That's what matters.
That's what matters. Top seed in the West. Clippers, Timberwolves, Thunder, Nuggets. 2 questions off of that. First, who do you think ends up with the number 1 seed? Right now it is the Nuggets going into tonight's game.
Yeah.
As we said, I think it's, everybody's got about 14, 16 games left. right now it's Nuggets, Thunder, Wolves, Clippers, all separated by 4 games. Who takes the top seed there?
Okay, I thought you said there was 2 questions.
Oh yeah, that's the first question.
Okay, just the first. Okay, you're gonna say the second question later. Got it. I think it's Denver. I would have said that even if they were the 4 seed today. Mm-hmm. I just think that they're playing great basketball. There's a gentleman at work named Josh, a good guy, except the fact that he's a Heat fan. Everything else I like about him.
Last year would have been great with you guys.
I know. Unfortunately, he didn't work for the company then. I did have a guy who worked for the company that was a Heat fan, though, so I had my fair share of butt whoopings at work. But anyway, we talk a lot about basketball and sports in general. And I told him, I said, I can't stand the Nuggets. I can't stand playing them. And, the question was like, oh, what specifically are you talking about that you don't like playing? I mean, I know they're good, but, like, what specifically? And I was like, it just feels like they don't really give a rip for the first 3.5 quarters. And then 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, they go, all right, you're not scoring and we're not missing. And it's one of those things where we just sit there and it happens every time. And you sit there and go, oh, it drives me nuts. Because you're thinking, oh, we're going to beat the Nuggets today. Like, we're up by, 4. In Denver. This is great. And then all of a sudden, Jamal Murray goes 9 for 9 in the fourth. And Jokic hits a 3-pointer with 9 hands in his face. 3 of them his teammates for some reason. And then, a team that is average defensively suddenly turns into the 85 Bears, but on the basketball court. And it's like, I don't understand. And literally, the Nuggets played the Heat last night as of time of recording. The Nuggets were up by 2 with about 5 minutes left. And they ended up winning by 12 because they went on a 10-0 run to end the game. They just went, hey, guess what, Miami? You will not be scoring for the rest of the game. And Miami could do nothing. They could not stop the Nuggets. They could not score on the Nuggets. It was useless.
Sounds like the NBA Finals all over.
And it was like one of those things where you sit there and go like, I don't understand why this happens, but that's how the Nuggets are. They understand what it takes to win a championship, and so the question of who's going to win the West, I think right now the Nuggets are playing their best basketball this season. They're hitting their stride. It's going to be Denver.
And to go with that night, they're playing their best basketball right now. They're 9-1 since the All-Star break. Winners of 4 in a row. So it's like I wouldn't be surprised if they do it. Does winning the number 1 seed matter in the West, though?
I think maybe a little bit. I think it depends on who does win it. I think if Denver wins it, then everybody's screwed. I think at that point, it's not gonna matter if Denver wins it because I think that for the most part, Denver would probably win the West anyway, right, even if they didn't win the number 1 seed. I think that you would, I trust the Nuggets to go into LA, to go into Oklahoma City, to go into Minnesota and win games. I do not necessarily trust the Minnesota Timberwolves to go into Denver, have to go into Denver 4 times and pull out some wins. I really don't. Yeah. Now, if Minnesota were to win the 1 seed and it were to be 3-3 and Minnesota were to be in Minnesota for a Game 7, I would think that Minnesota had a better shot in that moment. Just because, when you're at home, you have more energy, and so your defense typically plays better, and they have a defensive identity. Yeah. But for the most part, I don't think it matters. I think that Denver's probably going to come out of the West regardless of the seeding, but I also think that they're going to win the West, so it doesn't really matter. I don't know if any of that made any sense. But
well, no, I think it could matter for a team like the Thunder or the Timberwolves because that could give them that would give them home court advantage in the Western Conference Finals. For Thunder, Wolves, Clippers even versus the Nuggets. Clippers, I know I kind of hated on them before. The Clippers have always been one of those. It's like, I wish I could think of a good analogy right now. They're almost kind of I'm gonna diss my own team right now. They're like the Packers of basketball.
I was gonna say the Bills, but all right.
That might fit a little bit better, but it's like so much potential. Packers with Riders. With so much potential, you reach a championship.
At least you guys won a Super Bowl with Riders.
But then just can't win it when it counts. And that's just the Clippers to me. With Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Westbrook is still there, right?
Yes, he's coming off the bench, yes.
Which is crazy, that guy like Westbrook coming off
the bench. Well, they had no choice.
But he's late in his career. And
they tried to start all of them. They tried to go, when they first traded for James Harden, they went Westbrook, Harden, George, Kawhi, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then Zubac.
Yeah.
And there was only one ball, and none of them can score, and none of them could play defense very much except for Kawhi.
Yep.
Paul George is a little older; he's still a good defender, but he's not great.
Right.
And then you got two defensive liabilities in Russell Westbrook and James Harden, and so it was just awful. And so they went, all right, Russ, we gotta start Norman Powell, and I think you gotta go to the bench.
Yeah.
And ever since then, everything's opened up for them. They've done a lot.
At the same time, having a guy like Westbrook coming off the bench for you with that second unit come playoff time could really pay dividends for him, too.
I don't think it's going to matter.
It could. I'm saying it could.
To me, I think your playoff
bench,
James Harden's going to show up at some point. You're not going to,
But to me, like, in playoffs, especially when you get to that Game 5, Game 6, like, that bench is so important. If you don't have a bench, like, you're probably, you're not going to have much of a chance.
Yeah.
If you got at least a couple decent guys coming off your bench, like that depth, I think that's kind of what helped the Warriors early in their title run even before Durant. Is like having that bench depth, where they could cycle out some players and keep their system going, keep that scoring going. So the potential I think is there with someone like Westbrook coming off the bench. But again, that's kind of why I kind of dissed the Clippers earlier. Of like, I don't know if I necessarily include them in the top, but they're the 4th seed, 4 games out of first right now.
Yeah.
But staying in the West, the play-in. Right now, the play-in consists of, I can't believe, 4 teams of this talent. And you mentioned this when we talked about Phoenix earlier. But the play-in teams right now are Phoenix, Dallas, Golden State, and Los Angeles.
Yeah.
The Los Angeles Lakers.
Yep.
It's like... So who would you say right now comes out of the play-in? Which 2 teams?
The 2 teams are going to be Phoenix and Golden State. It's hard for me to pick. It's hard for me to pick the Lakers right now. I understand that they have LeBron and AD. So when you have those 2, you can do anything. I fully 100% understand that. But for me, I think Phoenix, and to me, I don't even think Phoenix is going to make the play-in. I think that they're going to play well enough down the stretch where they're going to barely make the 6th seed. And I think you're going to have a team like the Pelicans or the Kings that drop out. I would say
for the record,
probably,
there's only a game that separates those 3 teams right now.
Yeah, so I would say, unfortunately, the Pelicans is probably my pick to be in the play-in, and then they are just going to get eaten alive. But for me, I would say Golden State because I just cannot ever bet against Steph Curry. I think that if he makes the playoffs, he makes the play-in tournament, he's going to somehow at least find a way to make it into the playoffs. He's going to find a way. Because Steph Curry can just say, it's my ball. I'm going to just score 55 points and nobody can stop me.
What a guy that we've been able to watch.
I know. To be blessed with that. I'm a Celtics fan, right? So obviously the Warriors, to all of us, stole a championship that we feel like we were the better team that year. We truly did.
Boston was,
but we did not have the best player on the court, and they did, and that's what happens when you do that. Is that at any point they can just go, "I'm better than every single one of you," and there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah. And that's all it takes. And so I think that if you get let's say you get a Phoenix versus Lakers as your 7 and 8 seed, and your Dallas versus Warriors, I think that Steph Curry's going to find a way.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if he's the best player on the court at that point because you obviously have Luka on the other side.
Right.
But
we know we've seen him turn on before. He can turn on again.
Yeah, but there's just, first of all, the Mavericks' defense is absolutely appallingly bad. I think it might be the worst defense in the NBA outside of like the Wizards or the Pistons or somebody like that has no wins. But it's bad. It's so bad, especially since the All-Star break. They've just been awful defensively, and so I do not trust that in the playoffs one bit. And so I think the Warriors win that, and then it just comes down to Phoenix and LA. And I think that the main reason why, not main reason, but one of the main reasons why LA has stayed afloat where they're at is because of the emergence of D'Angelo Russell and how well he has played. Mm-hmm. But the problem with that is that when you get to the playoffs, guys like that are probably not going to be as effective. And they kind of need that right now. to stay afloat. They don't have a whole lot of talent outside of AD and LeBron.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, Austin Reeves is very, very good. And then, obviously, D'Angelo Russell. But beyond that, Cam Reddish, no. Christian Wood, not going to do it for me. Like, there's just, Jared Vanderbilt, Yuri Hachimura. Like, it just, none of those guys I just think are gonna really step up. And I would pick Phoenix to beat them. And so to me, I think that your 7 seed is going to be Phoenix, and I think your 8 seed is going to be the Warriors. So it's going to be very interesting. The top of the, I think top of the, I almost said the NFC West. I don't know why I just keep I'm with football today. Top of the Western Conference, first round is going to be Warriors versus Nuggets.
Yeah.
In the first round, I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, played for the rights to lose in the first round.
Yeah, it depends. I think Phoenix has a shot. If like say Minnesota is the 2 seed, I think Phoenix has a shot for sure.
Yeah.
Because I think you got to look at it from the perspective of Rudy Gobert has been absolutely putrid and ineffective in every way in the playoffs for his entire career. His play style just does not work in the modern playoff era. At least it hasn't so far.
Right.
And then the rest of their team, obviously Anthony Edwards aside, I trust none of them to step up in big moments in the playoffs. None. Yeah. And so, like, when you got another team that, first of all, Bradley Beal has not been to a finals, so he's going to be motivated. He's really not even been to the playoffs outside of the first couple of years in the NBA with John Wall.
Yep.
And then you've got KD, who's won several championships and been in as many playoff battles as you could possibly have, and Devin Booker, who has not only been to a finals, has led a team to a finals, and darn near won the thing.
Yep.
Without this much help.
Yes.
And, so I think that when I look at that team, I think that's a team that I can see stepping up on the road in the playoffs, winning games, close games, pulling it out, finding a way. Minnesota, I don't see it, especially with the way things have shaken this season. They're not very good in close games this year. They've lost a lot of overtime games and close games. Even at home, they're not very good in close games. So it's one of those things where I could see that. Even Oklahoma City, which I would bet way more for Oklahoma City in that circumstance, but I think that they would still struggle at times against Phoenix in the playoffs. And so, like, obviously, if they face Denver, we'll be seeing you, Phoenix. You're going to get destroyed. But, like, if they face the Clippers, if they face the Timberwolves, if they face
there's a lot of favorable.
I can see the Phoenix Suns pulling out a series.
To me, there is something to be said of. I don't necessarily buy into the whole conspiracy theory of teams wait until the playoffs to turn it all on.
Oh, no, I believe in it because I've seen the Miami Heat every year for the last 5 years.
But I think there is something...
I hate you, Jimmy Butler.
I think there's something to be said for the teams that are in the play-in because I'm looking at, again, the Suns, the Mavericks, the Lakers, and Warriors, and I'm like, all 4 of those teams could probably beat the Pelicans or Kings, maybe even the Clippers. All 4 of those teams could probably beat... Well, maybe not the Mavericks, but all 4, 3 of those 4 teams could beat the Pelicans or Kings straight up in the first round of the playoffs, no problem.
And that's why last year when it was 2 seeded, or not maybe not last year, 2 years ago I guess it was, when it was like 2 seeded Kings versus 7 seeded Warriors, everyone was like, oh well, Kings, you're done because you're not beating them. And then guess what? They were done. They lost. So it was like. It's just, clearly I think that, those teams have a shot. And it's one of those things where injuries play a huge role. The Kings have been, for the most part, healthy all season. Mm-hmm. The Pelicans have been, for the most part, healthy all season. And so they have had consistent playing time all year. Even the Clippers, I mean, Kawhi's been healthy for most of the year. Paul George has been healthy for most of the year. James Harden's been healthy for most of the year. Russell Westbrook's been healthy for most of the year. Whereas... a team like Dallas, who could obviously make the playoffs and not the play-in, they haven't dealt with a ton of injuries, but Luka's been out here and there, Kyrie's been out here and there, and they just don't have as much talent as those other teams. Phoenix has been decimated by injuries. Their big three's barely played together. The Lakers, we all know, they've had their share of injuries. Warriors, they've had their share of injuries as well. With suspensions from Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson's basically been, a shell of his former self. Andrew Wiggins has been out for most of the year.
Yeah.
And so you you never know what's going to happen, and that plays a huge role. But that's why I think when I look at it, if everybody's healthy, I think Phoenix and Golden State's coming out of the West.
I'm very looking forward to the West playoffs this year, just
Me too.
because of who comes out of the play-in.
Yeah.
Who's in there to begin with? Because again, like there's the Suns may not even be in there. That 7th seed can change. Turning to the Eastern Conference, two questions around your Celtics.
Stop talking about the Mavericks. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
What do the Celtics have to do to win the Eastern Conference?
Oh, that's such a hard question.
Stay healthy.
I think. Well, yeah, that's obvious. Yeah, obviously that's the big one, right? But
right.
but knock on wood, they've been. Well, there's no wood. Well, I'm knock on the floor, I guess.
There you go.
There we go.
But folks.
They've been mostly healthy all year, which is great. Obviously, Kristaps missed some games. A couple of the guys have missed some games here and there, but I think a lot of that's strategic. I think if it was the playoffs, I think most of the games that Porzingis has missed, he probably could have pushed it. But since it's the regular season and he's had injury history, I'm sure they're wanting to keep him out as much as possible and save him for the playoffs. But I think the main thing outside of staying healthy, because that's always the biggest thing that everybody needs to do, I think the biggest thing is just stay true to the proper way that they play Celtics basketball. I think too often, and we saw it against Cleveland, when the game gets tight and they're on the road and the other team's hot and they're not missing, and no matter what they do defensively, they can't stop somebody, they tend to go, okay, well, I need to stop this run. And so somebody goes iso ball, the ball gets stagnant, they have to take a tough shot, and even though they're great players, they miss. And then Dean Wade scores 21 unanswered points in the fourth quarter, and suddenly they lose the game.
This at all,
right? No, I'm never going to, because it bothers me so much that it had to be Dean Wade out of everybody.
Any relation to Dwight?
No, he's the whitest man alive. There's no relation at all. Unfortunately.
Sorry, I just said it wrong.
No, it's just one of those things where, I play 2K, and he's a 68 overall, and he scored 21 unanswered points against the Celtics. It's just like, why are you doing this to me? But anywho... I love you, Dean Wade. You're the best. But no, I think that when times get when it gets down to crunch time and you're on the road and you're playing against a tough team that's hounding you defensively, the ball has to keep moving. You have to keep staying true to how you've played all year. And I think that the real big thing that they need to do outside of that is when the games are tight and when things devolve into, this is back and forth, we can win it or we can lose it, you have to take easy shots. You have to find the easy shots. Is that going to happen every single possession? No. You're going to have great defensive possessions by another team where they take everything away and you have to figure something out. That happens. But, if you're shooting 33% from three as a team and you've only made 9 threes all game, don't take a contested three with 48 seconds left unless you absolutely have to. Right?
Right.
Just get a shot inside. Get Kristaps Porzingis a mismatch on the post. Have him... Look, if I would rather... And this is no offense to Derek White. Everybody in the world knows how much I love Derek White. He's such an improved shooter. By the way, we didn't talk about most improved player this year. Mm-hmm. We should have. My vote is Derek White. I know I talked about Jalen Williams earlier. My vote would still be Derek White. He went from a role player to a guy who's going to be a first-team all-defensive player this year because he's blocking every single thing in sight. He's averaging 2.2 blocks a game as a guard. Ridiculous. And he's averaging 20 points a night. I mean, he's just transformed his entire game. Anywho, there's no offense to Derek White. That's the whole point of what I'm saying.
Right.
I would much rather see Kristaps Porzingis get a mismatch with a guard, take a shot in the post and miss it because he's a human being, than have Derek White take a contested three down 2 or up 2 with 48 seconds left because, somebody went iso ball and he just had to chuck it up last minute because the shot clock was winding down. And again, that's no offense to Derek White. It's not his fault. But you could substitute Derek White for Drew Holiday, for Jason Tatum, for Jaylen Brown, for anybody. I don't care. I would rather you get a mismatch and try and get an easy shot and miss the easy shot than you to take a tough shot and go, oh God, what if you'd have gotten a better shot? Like, that's the best you could do?
Right.
I'd rather see that. Like, I've seen, like, Kristaps Porzingis miss a shot like that in close games down the stretch that we ended up losing. And I sit there and I think, crap, we lost. That stinks. But, like, we at least took good shots down the stretch. We at least did what we were supposed to do. We just didn't execute. You don't execute every time. Yeah, you don't execute every single time. It happens. Yeah. Like, everybody's human. Everybody loses. Like, it's fine. The thing is that if you're going to face a tough team, like especially like the Pacers, like the Knicks, that are going to be in that lower seed conversation, like that might be your first round matchup if you're the Celtics. Like, I don't want to see the Knicks in a close game because Jalen Brunson's not going to miss down the stretch, and they're a tough defensive team. Right. So, like, I don't want to see that. You got to be able to get mismatches. You got to be able to get Jalen Brunson on Kristaps Porzingis in the post. You got to be able to figure out ways to get that done. So those are the biggest things for me. Stay true to yourself. Have the ball keep moving. Don't do a lot of iso ball on offense. And then, when it gets to be close games, try and get mismatches and easy shots. That's what they've been doing for the majority of the time. But then you have games like Cleveland, where they did not do that for about 4 straight minutes. And guess what happened? Their 22-point lead evaporated in a matter of seconds, it felt like.
And I feel like that's crazy about today's game in the NBA is the fact that, I feel like kind of back in like the prime of Jordan and kind of at the beginning of Kobe's career, NBA in that era, I guess, so like mid-90s to early aughts, like if you had a 20-point lead, you were pretty safe. But I feel like not even like a 30-point lead isn't even safe because so many teams have that one player that, or any player can just light it up for whatever reason. They get in that right spot, right groove, and it's like... Yep.
And then all of a sudden they score 18 straight points.
I can't... NBA Jam. The old 2v2 NBA Jam was like, on fire, on fire, on fire.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. So, yeah. But yeah, no, that's a great question, man.
And then kind of keeping with the Celtics, do you think Cleveland or Milwaukee pose a threat to the Celtics?
Keep asking me Celtics questions. This is good. I like it. Okay. So just a threat in general.
I'm
like, are you asking which one poses a bigger threat?
Yeah, or who poses a bigger threat?
A bigger threat? Oh, always Milwaukee. Always Milwaukee. To me, no offense to Cleveland, right? Obviously, we just lost to them. I just talked about it. They can beat us. I'm not saying they can't.
Right.
But Milwaukee, they've got Giannis. And now they've got Damian Lillard. And so, like, their biggest issue...
And Dame knows how to turn on playoffs.
Yeah, and their biggest issue over the last handful of years has been, okay, well, if they don't have Giannis going absolutely insano, one might even say Captain Insano, shout out to Waterboy, like, if they don't have that, then they probably will not be able to win a ton of these really close playoff games. But now they have a guy who literally can just go, what time is it? And then suddenly... 20-point fourth quarter, and you just get buried. I mean, they literally, I don't forget who they played. I think it was the Clippers, where it was like, oh, Damian Lillard had a great first quarter, and then he did nothing for the second and third quarter, and then 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, bing, 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 you're buried, and that's it. Like, the Clippers fought all the way back. They were down for most of the game. They fought all the way back, and Damian Lillard went...
Kind of like we were talking about the Nuggets earlier.
And that's just...
The elite players know how to turn it, to dial it up just enough at the right time.
Yeah, and even there was a game the Celtics played against Milwaukee, early in the season, in Boston, and we were fully healthy. They were, I think, fully healthy. I don't remember if they had one guy out or something like Bobby Porter. I can't remember. And everybody was like, "Oh, the Celtics destroyed the Bucks." You did realize that the final score was the Celtics won by 2. You want to know why? Damian Lillard 3, 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 just over and over and over and over again, and you're just like, oh my god, like, this is ridiculous. And so, like, yeah, clearly Milwaukee, to me. Like, you've got the best athlete and probably the best player on the floor in Giannis. I still think he's a little bit better than JT at this point. And then, you've got a closer that, if Giannis is struggling... Like, Giannis in
they have a
game,
closer that they've never had.
like Giannis in Game 7 against the Celtics a couple of years ago struggled big time. I mean, he was really bad from the field. He was fouling a lot. He was missing easy layups. When Giannis gets into that in his head mode, he's going too hard, and he doesn't have that soft touch anymore. He can just go, actually, I'm not feeling it here, Damian. You score 29 points in a row here. You're welcome. And then he gets easy, really tough diving and freaking, hand switch layups, and then step back 3, 8 feet behind the line. And, like, he can do that now.
Yeah.
And plus, a healthy Chris Middleton helps as well. Obviously, he's not the Chris Middleton he once was. After all these lower body injuries, I'm honestly surprised he's still even remotely effective.
Crazy.
So the fact that he's there, Bobby Portis is really good. Obviously, Brook Lopez can now shoot from half court, and so it's just and they have Malik Beasley, who's I don't know if he still is, because Grayson Allen really shot up the leaderboard, but at one point he was leading the NBA in 3-point percentage. Malik Beasley, so
Gotcha.
You've got
that's the name I've ever heard in a while.
Yeah, you've got a lot of they got a lot of talent. That's why I'm picking Milwaukee. Now, I'll say Cleveland, man. I think that, again, seed wise they're a little high than what I thought, but that's just because I thought the East would be a little better. I thought that they'd win about 50 games because I'm a big fan of Evan Mobley. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the NBA right now. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell, we all know what he can do. Darius Garland is a baller.
Yep.
They signed Max Strus. He's a guy that can hit big shots. They have a lot more shooting coming off their bench now than they did last year, which was their big problem. Why they couldn't beat the Knicks is because they couldn't, if they didn't have a lead, they couldn't shoot their way out of a lead. And so, it was, or back into a lead, I should say. I think Cleveland is a huge threat this year because they're at full strength and they have a lot more shooting. But I still think Milwaukee is the bigger threat out of the two.
Gotcha. I'm just going to kind of move down the rankings in the Eastern Conference. The Knicks and Magic, I mean, I feel like there's a definite tier of Boston, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and then you get everybody else. Mm-hmm. Do you think the Knicks or Magic can jump up, or what? Let me phrase it this way: the Knicks or Magic. What is their ceiling? I think in the playoffs.
Oh well, ceiling, the Knicks can go to the finals. And the reason I say that is
finals or NBA finals.
NBA finals. And the reason I say that is because they are demolished by injuries right now. Mm-hmm. And you were talking. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but you were talking about Tom Thibodeau possibly being coach of the year. I think that if the injury bug hadn't absolutely destroyed their team, I think that he might have been up there. But the problem is now he's playing with a bunch of bench guys. Mm-hmm. Now Jalen Brunson did just recently come back, so that's nice. You get your best player back. But there was a game against the Celtics where Mitchell Robinson's out for the year, OG Anunoby was out, Jalen Brunson was out, and Julius Randle was out. That's 4 of your 5 starters were not playing. The only starter that was out there. Oh crap! Who was their only starter that was out there? I'm completely blanking right now. I don't even remember. But point is that all their starters were out. Bogdanovich is still there. Alec Burks is still there. Isaiah Hartenstein has really stepped up without Mitchell Robinson there. You've got a very, very good nucleus of players if they're fully healthy. If you're fully healthy, that roster is dangerous. I mean, defensively, offensively, they can do it all. And so for me, and then Josh Hart, obviously. I mean, that's not, you're 9 or 10 deep.
Yeah.
A really solid, if not borderline all-star players. I'm not saying Isaiah Hartenstein's borderline all-star, but obviously Bogdanovich, borderline all-star. I don't know if Burks is there anymore, but at one point he was. Yep. These are not slouches.
Right.
These are really good players. And so, that team, ceiling-wise, if they're fully healthy, they can beat anybody in the East, especially with their coach and the way they play. They are tough. They are gritty. They never quit. They are always a threat to come back in games. They could definitely, even if they were to just be in the play-in, I'd be scared to face them in the first round if they're fully healthy. It'd be like a Brooklyn and Boston thing a couple years ago, where the Celtics were the 2 seed, and the Nets all year were injured and just demolished, and then right as playoff came around, Kyrie and KD were fully healthy and ready to go. And you're like, God dang it, I have to play them round 1? You gotta be kidding me. Now, it ended up being the most competitive sweep in the history of the NBA because we beat them by like a combined 9 points in 4 games or whatever it was.
Right.
But we ended up sweeping them. But like that doesn't matter. Like
I would be
no, not at all. And I'm not saying that we would sweep the Knicks. I don't think we would. But like it would be something like that where every game would be close. Every game I'd be yanking my hair out, and it would be horrible. Now the Magic. I like the Magic. I do. It's another one of those situations where a lot like Oklahoma City or a lot like Minnesota, I don't know how they would perform in the playoffs, and they are not as good as either of the 2 teams I just mentioned, defensively or offensively. So, for me, talent can only go so far in the playoffs, and I think Orlando would be one of those teams where, especially depending on who they played, like for instance, let's say right now, Orlando barely makes it out of the play-in, so they're the 6th seed. They face the 3 seed in Milwaukee Bucks. They're getting run out of the gym. It's not going to happen. It's just really going to depend on who they play. Now, if they play Cleveland, I can see that being a little bit more competitive just because Cleveland is also a lot unproven in the playoffs, that team together. Although they have more proven guys, obviously. Struce. My dog's going nuts. Apparently he really likes Max Struess. That's what I just heard. His Moose and Struess, it rhymes. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yes, my dog's name is Moose. Go nuts. But I obviously Max Struess is a guy that's proven himself. Donovan Mitchell's a guy that's proven himself. They've got guys that have proven themselves.
Right.
But I think that especially depending on who they face, like goodness, if they got to face Milwaukee round 1, they're gonna get destroyed. If they have to face New York round 1, they're gonna a fully healthy New York. Obviously, they're gonna get destroyed. I think even if you faced Boston, I think Boston you might steal a game, maybe even 2, but you're not going to beat them. You're not going to beat them 4 times out of 7. I'm sorry, you're just not. At least I don't think so. Watch the Magic beat us in round 1 this year. Now that I said that, but it is what it is. And even a team like Philly, right, where let's say Joel Embiid comes back here, and then Philly ends up being the 3 seed. You're getting killed if you're Orlando and you're facing that team. Right. I mean, good grief.
Yeah.
You don't have anybody that can stop Max, and you definitely don't have anybody that can stop Embiid on that roster. So, it's one of those things where I just don't think that their ceiling this year is very high in the playoffs. We see surprises every year. I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up pulling out a series.
Right.
But I think once you start getting into the nitty-gritty, unless they just avoid all the tough teams and they end up going like, all right, round 1 we face a depleted New York Knicks, and then round 2 we face, a Cleveland Cavaliers team without Donovan Mitchell because he blew out his knee in the first round, but they somehow still pulled it out. And then Boston got upset by Chicago, and now we got to face Chicago. Like, it's not going to happen. That's my answer. That makes sense. Hopefully.
No, that's fine. I almost kind of feel like the Knicks maybe should belong in that conversation with the Bucks and
they
Cavs
do.
A little bit more.
When they're fully healthy, they do. But right now, they don't have their team. Their team's not healthy, and so they are unfortunately fighting for their playoff lives because their team is not healthy. But if they were fully healthy, they were the 2 seed at one point, and then. The basketball gods decided that they did not deserve to be the 2 seed, and so they took away all of their starters. Yeah, and so it's like one of those things. It was like, oh, be gone with all of your talent, and it's just it sucks. But anyway,
just a little bit more here. I'm curious what you think. Let's look at the play-in teams right now. So 76ers and Pacers, I would say, are both kind of tied for that 6th seed. I'm assuming whichever one of those teams ends up falling into the play-in. I'm assuming you're taken into would get into the playoffs.
I think that they would at least make the playoffs. Yeah. I wouldn't. I mean, depending on where Joel Embiid is at, like let's say Philly ends up at the 7th seed, I wouldn't be surprised if Philly doesn't have Embiid, and even if they have like one more injury until by then, I wouldn't be shocked if they lost their first game. I think they'd still make it out and be the 8th.
They'd make out of the
but I don't think that they would. I don't think that they would make. I don't think that they'd win the first game. Maybe not that I don't think. I wouldn't be surprised. But what's the between the play-in teams then like Sixers or Pacers. Pacers most likely making the playoffs one way or another. Probably yes.
Whoever falls into the play-in.
Yes.
So between the Heat, Bulls, and Hawks, who's the other team that makes it?
Miami.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's
Bulls or Hawks don't have a chance, right?
No. No. Well, then, okay, not gonna say no. They always have a chance. But here's the thing. If anybody is betting against the Miami Heat at this point, you're stupid. You're stupid because it does not matter. Literally, the Miami Heat last year could not have been any closer to not making the playoffs. They were down to the Bulls with 2 minutes left, down 11. In the loser gets eliminated from the playoffs completely game. In the 8 seed game. You literally could not have been any closer to not making the playoffs than they were last year. If you were going to bet against the Heat, you'd have bet right then and there, they're not making the playoffs. And then they did. And then they beat everyone. And it's so, like, I don't care unless I see Jimmy Butler have the bottom half of his left leg go flying off of his body during the play-in game. Like, first quarter. And he's definitely ruled out. I will not bet against the Miami Heat. I just can't do it because I'm a Celtics fan. And every year I go, they're not going to get us this year. They got lucky. And then they do. Every year. Every freaking year they get us.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how little talent they have compared to us. It doesn't matter how many injuries they have. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't. Somebody will average 30 points a night that never played for them. Orlando Robinson. He barely plays. If he played against the Celtics in the playoffs, he'd average 29 points and 14 rebounds a night. I'm sure, because guess what? Last year, I know I'm ranting. Last year, Caleb Martin, career average 7 points a night, averaged 26 points per game in the Eastern Conference Finals. And then you know what he averaged in the NBA Finals? 7 points a game. He went right back to being Caleb Martin. Only against Boston he decided to just be Super Saiyan. I don't know, did somebody threaten his mother in game 1? I don't know what happened, but suddenly he decided to be an all-star for 7 games. Point being Miami. That's who I think would make it out.
Are you sure that's your answer? I'm not quite clear on what your
I think it's
answer is
Charlotte. That's my answer. Charlotte's gonna make a big comeback now.
You know, I mean, they're only 12 games out of the play-in.
Yeah, they're only 12 games out of the play-in. Oh my God.
They were 12 games left. They were a pick for the play-in.
Jesus. No, not for me. Oh boy. No, I don't know who picked that. That's a bad choice. I never thought Charlotte was getting into the play-in. Oh my God. Okay, anyway, yeah, Miami. Anybody who bets against Miami at this point is just, it's silly. I mean, I don't know, like, who is sitting there going, yeah, Miami, yeah, no, I think it's going to be Philly, and I think it's going to be... Now, I will say this. If somehow, like, Chicago or Atlanta makes a big run, and they get the 6th seed, and it's Philly, and it's Indiana, and it's Miami in the play-in... Then I wouldn't be surprised if Miami didn't make it.
Right.
Especially if Joel Embiid came back in the play-in. I wouldn't be surprised if Indiana got the Heat like in their first game and then beat them, just because Indiana can get really hot one game and it's all you need in the play-in. And then you got to face a team that, when fully healthy, was like a top 2 or 3 team in the East. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if that happened. So that's really the only way that I would look at it and say I don't literally think the Heat are the favorite to make it out of the play-in.
So one last.
I feel a lot better now. By the way, that felt
you sure?
I needed to get that.
You don't like Miami. That's the impression I got.
I want all of them. All of you die. No, not all of you die. That's very mean. I don't mean that at all.
You don't have to give me a winner for the NBA championship right now, but right now, where everybody's at, who's winning the East, who's winning the West?
Celtics Nuggets.
Now
I know it's the 1 seed in both sides, but I think obviously the Celtics could not make it. I mean, that's pretty clear. They apparently enjoy that. They enjoy not making it.
They just want to torture you.
Yeah, exactly. They do. That's all the whole reason that they do this, is to torment us.
Boston are long stretch.
But I think the thing is this year they have Drew Holiday, and I think he's your X factor, because every year the Celtics have been there, right? Other than when they had Kyrie, but they didn't have really a chance when they had Kyrie, because they had 1 year with Kyrie and he was basically by himself and they got destroyed. And so, like, other than that year, they had nobody on their roster that had ever been to an NBA Finals or won a championship and knew what it took. Drew Holiday does. He won one in Milwaukee. He knows exactly what it takes to
That's
get
why
it.
it was brought in.
He knows exactly what to do. And I expect Drew Holiday, while his defensive numbers have slipped a little bit this year, I expect to see playoff Drew Holiday. And playoff Drew Holiday is a dangerous defensive weapon.
Yes, he is.
I expect that. And if I don't get that, then I'm going to be wicked, like, so upset. Like, it's going to be very... Oh, yeah. So, well, I think at that point you have no choice. And that was actually my original point, which is I think that he, along with everyone else on that roster, is looking around going, all right, JB's making 60 mil. JT's about to make 60 mil. Or he's going to leave. But either way, we're not going to be able to keep KP for 35 mil a year. We're not going to be able to keep Drew Holiday for 25 mil, 30 mil a year. We're not going to be able to keep Al Horford for 10, 15 mil a year. We're not going to be able to...
still playing.
We're not going to be able to keep Derek White for 20 million a year like he's been making. Like, we can't keep all of these contracts together. So, in the next 2 to 3 years, this team is going to have to get rid of guys. They're going to have to start blowing it up.
Yeah.
They're going to have to start trading guys away, letting guys go. It's a short window. This is it. And I think they know it. And, yeah, you can say that pressure might get to them, and I wouldn't be surprised. But I think that sometimes it takes a little bit of that pressure to actually kick you in the butt enough to get moving and get going. Yeah. And I think that when you've got a guy like Drew Holiday now that can reframe and restructure that pressure that they feel from a negative to a, hey, the reason why we have that pressure is because we are truly better than everybody. We just have to go out and prove it. Mm-hmm. Let's go out and freaking prove it. And then he makes a couple plays where you're like, oh, damn, that's Drew Holiday. He's on our team. Let's freaking go.
Right.
I'm going to freaking hit this step back three real quick and get
exactly
Boston Garden jumping. Let's freaking go. Like, I'm getting fired up thinking about it because, like, that's the stuff that gets fans going and players going is those moments. So I think the Celtics are going to have enough to make it out of the East. I know you said to not give a winner of the finals, but I'm going to.
If you want to, it's fine. I just don't want to put it
But I don't think the Celtics have enough to win a championship. I think that, unfortunately, Denver is just too good. I talked about it earlier. They drive me nuts because when it's close in games, they will basically say, you are not scoring and we will not miss. And the Celtics' weakness is, when it gets in close games, they always miss, and the other team never misses. And so that is a recipe for a hashtag disaster in the NBA Finals. Unless the Celtics are up by 30 in the fourth, I will not even be a smidge comfortable playing the Denver Nuggets. And by the way, if they're up 30, I'm still only a smidge comfortable. Because Jokic could go, am I in the building? Cool.
Do you think I think as of right now, the Celtics have the best record in the league.
By far. By about about 5 or 6 games.
So, unless Denver goes on an ungodly run, Boston should have home court advantage if it's Denver for the finals. Do you think that helps them, though? Do you think that gives them a better chance to beat Denver?
Oh, sure. Yeah, because we've only lost 3 games at home. But you know what? Who one of those 3 losses was? Denver. Doesn't matter.
Right.
Like, so that's why I say I think Denver going on the road, like winning, like if they won the 1 seed, forget it. Yeah. Forget it. You're not beating them 4 out of 7 if they have home court. You're just not. I don't care who you are. And so I think the Celtics getting home court is imperative. Mm-hmm. Now, am I saying that nobody can beat Denver in Denver like once? No, of course not. But if they've got home court, right? You're probably going to have to beat them multiple times in Denver.
You're going to have to win at least 2 games in Denver.
Yeah, and because they're going to be able to win a game on the road. They're at least one. And so, like, you really have to tighten it up. And so I think Celtics having home court against Denver would be imperative because I think that Denver is going to win at least 1 game in Boston. But I also think that they'd probably win 2 or 3 because I think if Denver and the Celtics got together in the finals, I don't think the Celtics have much chance right now, what I'm seeing. Now, that would break my heart because we'd have to blow the team up, unfortunately, if that were to happen. And obviously, we would not have a championship, and we would have all these freaking playoff wins and all these accolades, and we'd have nothing to show for it.
Right.
But at the same time, like, it just, looking at the two teams and how they play, that's just the outcome that makes the most sense to me. And I think that everybody also kind of feels that right now. Now, nothing would make me happier than the Celtics to prove me wrong. And I mean literally zero things would make me happier than the Celtics going, oh no, we've had enough. We figured it out. We're going to destroy everybody. And if they do figure it out, God help the NBA. Because let me tell you something. If this team is willing to stay together and take pay cuts for like 3 or 4 years, and they figure out how to win a championship together, God help us. I mean, it's going to be like 4 or 5 championships in a row. Like, I think that's what's scary. Is like the Celtics are so talented that if they figure it out once, I mean, it might be over. I mean, who's going to beat them in the East?
Right.
They're going to at least go to the finals every year if they figure it out. So it's one of those things where, you just, the rest of the NBA kind of prays that doesn't happen, whereas a Celtics fan, you're like, please, finally again, yes, bring back the 70s, right? Like, it's just like, one of those things where you're just like, yes, let's win 11 out of 13 again, let's do it. But no, it's never going to happen. But, like, not with the draft and everything now, but I think the Celtics can make it out of the East. I think they probably will make it out of the East, but I think that if they run into Denver, they're not winning the finals.
That's all I have for you.
Okay.
I think that was fun. I don't, I'm very curious to see how the West shakes out because I really, kind of what you just alluded to, the competition, I think, top to bottom is tougher in the West versus the East.
Yep.
Outside of a couple teams that could give Boston trouble. I feel like it's kind of the battle for the number 2 seed, in both conferences because it's like Boston and Denver are kind of the class of each conference. Yeah. But
well, I definitely
playoff basketball does some weird things.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely could see Denver not making the 1 seed. I could see them kind of coasting a little bit and them not caring, whereas like a Minnesota is like, dude, we need
Minnesota or Oklahoma could
hugely we freaking need it, and I mean, I'll tell you what, if Minnesota figures it out, oh god, those are gonna be bloodbaths. Like, I don't know if you've watched the Celtics Timberwolves games this year. They played twice. Both games went to overtime. Wow. I mean, it was just a defensive bloodbath. I mean, both teams couldn't score because the defense was so intense. And one game, Minnesota went on Ant went on a crazy run in overtime to basically single-handedly beat us. And then in Boston, Jason Tatum went on a crazy run in OT to single-handedly beat them. And it's like one of those things where you're like, oh my god, I can't, like, you imagine that freaking NBA Finals? It would just be a bloodbath. Oh, it'd be so much fun.
Ant, one-on-one. I mean,
it would be so much fun. But like, I would age by 40 years, like watching those games. Like, at least
to me,
like it was one of those things where like the 2022 Finals. And listen, guys, you can go back and check me. It's on you. It's on the channel, or at least it should be, unless I've deleted it by now. But I went and I predicted every single game and how it would end in the 2022 NBA Finals. And I got them all right except for Game 6. I thought the Celtics would at least have a little bit of fight left in them and win Game 6 and then lose Game 7. But I picked the Warriors to beat the Celtics as much as I wanted the Celtics to win. And as much as I thought that the Celtics were the better team. I said, I don't really think it matters who's the better team in the Finals. I think it matters who is the best player. And Steph Curry is the best player on the floor.
Yeah.
And he's been there a million times. He's going to drop 40 a night. And then guess what? He dropped 40 a night and they won. So, like, it happened.
Yeah.
So, like...
And it's not like Boston played bad basketball in a sense. They just...
I think that at times they played very bad basketball.
Like you said, Steph was the best player on the court.
Mm-hmm.
They were a good team, but Steph was the best player on the court.
Yeah. And our best player, the best player on our team, was very ineffective.
Yep.
He was very, very injured. You could clearly tell he was not himself.
Yeah.
He was a distributor for the entire series, and he just couldn't score.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's going to do it for us, guys. A lot of fun, Dan. We're going to be doing more of these. I don't know if it's going to be necessarily in streaming. We were going to do this. We were going to actually just record this. I mean, you guys, this might be a recording. I'm not sure. It depends on how the actual stream went. I'll have to check it. But we were supposed to record this on Tuesday, but Dan had a scheduling conflict, couldn't end up doing it, so we had to move it to today. So it was a little different. So, but we're going to be doing more of these with NFL stuff, NFL draft. Obviously, more wrestling content coming up soon. WrestleMania is right around the corner. It's probably going to be next week or the week after, so we'll hash that out. But We're going to be doing more of these MLB stuff, possibly. Who knows?
Yep.
So
Season's about to start.
So we'll figure it all out, but that's going to do it for us, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching and being patient with us. And again, thank you, and we'll see you all next time.